What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with my review of the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G. So let's get started. Now, to clear up some potential confusion, the Moto G Stylus 5G is actually the third iteration in the Moto G Stylus series. Now, in 2020, we got the first Moto G Stylus. Then, in January of 2021, we got the successor to that phone, which is known as the Moto G Stylus 2021. And I've actually already done a comparison of this phone versus that phone. But then finally, now in June of 2021, we've gotten the Moto G Stylus 5G, which is the first 5G compatible device in the Motorola Moto G Stylus series. Now, to make things clear, having 5G support is by far not the only difference between this device and the 4G only phone that launched in January of 2021. The phones have completely different processors, they have different sized batteries, they have a different camera arrangement on the back. There are a bunch of differences, so certainly take a look at that video after you're done watching this one. Now, as far as pricing and availability goes for the Moto G Stylus 5G, the phone is being offered factory unlocked with support for all major carriers, and it is being offered at an MSRP of $399. Now, as you can imagine, prices are always changing, there's always different promotions going on as well, so definitely take a look at the links in the video description to see the most up-to-date pricing for this device. Now, another thing to keep in mind too is that the Moto G Stylus 5G most likely will be offered at a variety of different carriers. Now, at the time that I'm making this video, it is not. However, I'm certainly expecting in not too long from now that this phone will be available by the carriers. And typically, what happens in situations like that is that the carriers give phones like this extremely good discounts. So I'd imagine that 99% of people that watch this video probably won't end up paying the full MSRP for this device. And if you're watching this video right now and you already own the Moto G Stylus 5G, then I'm definitely curious to know where you got it. Now, with this device, we're getting a large 6.8-inch display. Now, the display itself is IPS LCD at 1080p. We're getting a PPI of 386. We're getting a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor here with the phone, and we're getting an 85% screen-to-body ratio. So in general, we have pretty small bezels all around the device, which allows us to have quite a bit of screen real estate while still keeping the form factor of the phone pretty small. Now, there certainly are other display technologies out there, such as OLED and AMOLED, that are better than LCD. But this display is completely fine. I think it looks nice and crisp and clear, colors are very good as well, and in general, definitely will get the job done. Now, we'll be discussing this later on in the video, as I'll be showing you quite a bit of things about the stylus here on the phone. But that is another big benefit of having a display this big, is that it is really ideal to get the best stylus experience. Because if your phone is a really tiny display, then using a stylus on that certainly wouldn't work out quite as well. But basically, I would say the display is certainly a strong point here with the phone, and I'm certainly happy with it. And as far as the taller and more narrow form factor go, it's actually ideal for the way that most people use their phones nowadays. For example, if you have your social media feed pulled up on this phone, since the display is more tall and narrow, you're technically going to be able to fit more of your feed in a single frame, which means that you won't be scrolling quite as much. But as you've probably noticed, this device does have a hole punch for the front-facing camera, and that front-facing camera is 16 megapixels. Now, later on in this video, I will be showing you a variety of different photo and video samples from it, and the other cameras as well, but you will be able to take some pretty decent selfies with it. Now, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this device features 256 gigabytes of internal storage, and we're also getting micro SD card expansion. So that's very impressive that we're getting that much internal storage. Now, it is possible if this phone is offered at various carriers, they might make a variant of it that has less internal storage, but at least the factory unlocked model does give you 256 gigabytes. Now, of course, having micro SD card expansion with any phone certainly will give you extra space to put your photos, videos, and other media, but I will say nothing's really better than having as much internal storage as possible. And another interesting thing as well is that even now in 2021, the base model iPhone 12, which is way more expensive than this phone, only has 64 gigabytes. and no micro SD card expansion. So the fact that you're getting 4 times the amount of storage with the Moto G Stylus 5G, despite it being quite a bit less than the base model iPhone 12, is pretty amazing. Now with this device, we do have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the phone, and it does work really well. As you saw right there, very quick. Let's give that a try one more time. Again, very fast. So in general, I'm a big fan of it. Now in addition to having the fingerprint sensor on the back of the phone, this device also features Face Unlock. So I do appreciate that there are multiple methods for getting into the phone. And if you already have a phone that has Face Unlock and you use that feature pretty often, then you're going to feel right at home here with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now on the back of the device, we do have a quad camera setup. So we're getting a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now I'll show you in a second, but the macro camera allows you to take very close up pictures while still retaining a bunch of detail. But as the depth sensing camera probably implied, this phone does support portrait mode for both the rear and front cameras, which is certainly really awesome if you are one of those people that likes to get nice, blurred out backgrounds when you're taking certain photos. Now here's how things look on the camera app on the device. This is with the main camera right here. Then from there, we can switch over to the ultra wide angle camera and we can fit quite a bit more content into the frame. We can also easily switch over to the macro camera. And again, you can see despite being very close up to this plant, the detail is pretty incredible here. Then from there, we can switch back to the normal camera, go over to this menu in the bottom right corner. And then from here, we can select portrait mode. So with portrait mode, again, you get those nice blurred out backgrounds, and that does apply to both the rear and front cameras as well. There's also quite a few other options, such as cutout, spot color, night vision, cinemagraph, panorama, group selfie, live filter, pro mode, which gives you a bunch of different customizations here. Then for video, we have slow motion, time lapse, spot color, and then dual capture. Now dual capture is pretty interesting, and this is actually the only Moto G Stylus device that has this. But essentially, you can take video with both the rear and front-facing cameras at the same time. And you can pick which one you want to be the dominant camera. So that's pretty incredible. Now sadly, there is one problem when it comes to taking video with this phone. And the issue is that this phone does not support 4K video recording. In fact, with the rear camera, it maxes out at 1080p at 60 FPS and 1080p at 30 FPS with the front. Now, I did notice that some of the bigger tech media outlets did mention, at least on some articles, that the Moto G Stylus 5G does have 4K video support, but it does not. Obviously, it can play 4K video, but you can see here in the video section on the camera app, when you go to the settings, we have a setting for frame rate. We can go between 30 and 60, but there is no option to choose 4K video. Whereas with other phones in the Moto G Stylus series, like the Moto G Stylus 2021 that launched in January of this year, when you go in this section here, there is an option to toggle between 1080p and 4K. So that is disappointing. And I know that 1080p is still probably the most popular video recording resolution. However, I also would have liked if they gave us an option for 720p. Because technically, the file sizes for 720p are way smaller, so if you want to take a lot more videos and put them on your phone, or just take videos that are easier to send or upload to Google Drive or Dropbox, for example, and maybe you don't care about the quality quite as much, then it would be nice to be able to record in 720p. So I do wish they gave us more customizations when it comes to that. It is possible that the phone can't record 4K video as a limitation associated with the processor here in the phone. Not that it's a bad processor, but there are certain processors that simply don't allow 4K video recording. But the point is that pretty much every phone that this phone competes against does have 4K video recording. Now, as far as the RAM and processor go, with this device, we're getting 6 gigabytes of RAM and we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. Now, typically, the 400 series from Qualcomm never has been too great. However, this processor is actually pretty decent. It's not incredibly powerful, but it's certainly very usable, and definitely usable enough for the majority of people out there. If you're going to be using your phone for phone calls, text messages, normal to moderate social media usage, and video watching, then this will be completely fine for you. For the most part, you really only need a more powerful processor if you're editing video on your phone, or if you're playing really high demanding games. Or maybe this is like your main work phone, then you probably would want it to be very powerful. But for the most part, The Snapdragon 480 5G does get the job done. Now I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test here with the phone. Here are the scores from that test. I got a single core score of 494 and a multi-core score of 1336. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you. But if you can somehow find a way to get this phone at a carrier for like $200 or even $150, because I know that they typically offer very generous discounts like that, then this phone is certainly a great deal. Now, the battery capacity with this device is 5,000 milliamp hours, and that's actually pretty fantastic. The only downside with it is that the recharging is limited at 10 watts, whereas other devices such as the Samsung Galaxy A52 5G support charging up to 25 watts. So the point is that the charging isn't extremely slow, but it is a bit slower than the competition. Now, as far as software here, we are getting Android 11, and it's a mostly stock experience. However, Motorola has added in some various features of their own. Now, I go over all of that in my dedicated tips and tricks video here on the channel, so definitely take a look at that. But for the most part, I'm happy with the software experience. It's a nice, clean, well-optimized build of Android. Now, the only issue is that while this phone does have Android 11, Motorola does not have the best track record when it comes to major Android software updates. This phone definitely will get security patches, so no concerns there. However, if you want to get Android 12, Android 13, who knows, even Android 14, you most likely won't be getting any of those. Maybe Android 12, but certainly not 13 or 14 with this phone. So if you do want to get software updates for a very long period of time, which that's not always very important for everybody, but if you think you are one of those people, then you might want to take a look at the Pixel 4a. Another limitation too with this device is that there is no NFC, which I cannot believe. I mean, we're in 2021 at this point where Apple Pay and even Google Pay are very popular. People love making mobile contactless payments using NFC. And even if that's something you don't do at the moment, it might be something that you might want to do in the future. So the fact that there is no NFC with this phone is pretty disappointing, especially since it really wouldn't have cost Motorola too much to incorporate NFC anyway. It's not like they're really saving a ton of money by not giving us NFC. It's really just a feature that they decided not to do. But now that we've gone over the major specifications of the phone, let's now take a closer look at the hardware. Now, I already talked quite a bit about the front panel here, but essentially, it's a very good looking phone. Pretty standard as far as Android devices go nowadays, but we're getting small bezels all throughout, and then we are getting that hole punch for the front-facing camera. So I'm a big fan of this design. Now, taking a look at the left side of the phone, we have just the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Then on the right side of the device, we have the power button, volume down and volume up. Then up top here, we have the noise-canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C port for charging and data transfer. We have the microphone, speaker, and the stylus, which we'll take a look at in a second. Then on the back of the phone, we have the camera module, flash, and we have the fingerprint sensor. Now, in general, I like this whole setup and layout on the back of the phone. I also am a big fan of the color. However, definitely take note that due to this being a glossy back, the phone is going to pick up quite a few fingerprints. Now, if you're like me, then you most likely will be using your phone in a case, but I just want to make it really clear on what you're getting into here. And one other hardware limitation that I do want to point out as well is that there are no stereo speakers. And that's a feature that Motorola has done in the past, but they've decided not to do here with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, stereo speakers basically means that you'll have audio coming out of the main speaker on the bottom, but also audio coming out of the earpiece if you're watching videos, listening to music, or really just doing anything that involves your phone playing audio. Now, the speaker itself does sound pretty good, but compared to its various rivals out there, and compared to the Moto G Stylus 2020, which was the first generation model, the speakers are not nearly as good here. Now, I don't think the speakers are a deal breaker by any means, but just keep in mind that for a mid-range phone, the speakers that you're getting here are certainly not class leading. Another cool thing too is that this phone does feature a water repellent design. I'm not sure what all that involves, but Motorola does advertise it, and I certainly wouldn't put this phone under water on purpose. However, if you're outside and it starts raining, I wouldn't be too concerned. But now getting on to the signature feature of the phone, which is why it's called the Moto G Stylus 5G, and that is the stylus. Now, they have made some changes to the stylus this time around. It's a little bit smaller, at least at the end, but it does feature a click out, click in design, very similar to the various Note phones that Samsung has put out over the years. But essentially, once you take the stylus out, you can use it for general navigation around the phone, but also you get this little sidebar that pops up here, and we have some different options. So one of the options is to create a note. Now I created one earlier in another video, but we'll create an additional one. So yeah, basically like you can draw. That's my attempt at making glasses. But yeah, basically you can draw here, you can backtrack, you can write. So there definitely is a lot of versatility here. You have choices of different pens as well. But the cool thing though is that since this is Android, you have all kinds of apps that you can choose from in the Play Store that are already optimized to be used with a stylus like this one, especially since the Note series of phones have been so popular over the years. Essentially, you can just take apps that are designed for that device and use them on here, which is pretty cool. And then what's cool as well is that this sidebar can be customized. So you can add any app that you want. It doesn't have to be necessarily even a stylus specific app. You could add Instagram, you could add Spotify, you can add whatever you want up here. So that's pretty cool as well. There's also other stylus specific options. So it can record the time that the stylus was last removed. It can remind you if the stylus has been taken out and not put back in the phone for an extended period of time. So definitely a lot of cool things you can do here with the stylus on the device. So I'm definitely a big fan of that feature. And another thing I like about it as well, even though, of course, the main focus of this phone is the stylus, you could technically never use the stylus and it wouldn't really get in the way either. Since it does stow away very conveniently and seamlessly into the bottom of the phone, you could use it once a month, once a year. It doesn't really matter. It's still a perfectly fine phone, even if you never use the stylus at all. I'm definitely a big fan of having that kind of flexibility with a phone like this one. Now, I spent some quality time taking photos and videos with the Moto G Stylus 5G, and from my experience of using the cameras on this phone, I feel like they are perfectly adequate for the majority of people out there. Now, compared to a flagship phone like the Samsung Galaxy S21, for example, or the OnePlus 9 Pro, or even compared to the iPhone 12, you're not going to be getting nearly as good a photo or video quality. But for a mid-range device, I think the quality does look good. And really, for the average smartphone user out there, I think the camera quality is perfectly adequate. In my opinion, the biggest benefit of having a flagship device versus one like this when it comes to the photo quality is that with a flagship phone, you can pretty much take a photo no matter what the conditions are, no matter what the sunlight is like, and the pictures are going to look good. However, with a phone like this, things can technically be a bit overexposed and it will be noticeable. But on the other hand, I also took photos in situations where there was a lot of shade and also a lot of brightness, and the phone's camera still managed to make the pictures look pretty good. But let's now take a look at some video samples from the Moto G Stylus 5G. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a 1080p test video using the main rear camera on the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G. Nice quick autofocus in video mode. Another thing I like as well is that you can actually switch to the ultra wide angle camera while you're still recording the same video. So now, here's how things look with the ultra wide. And then now I'll switch over to the regular again. So that's without the ultra wide. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a 1080p front-facing test video from the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G. I'm definitely curious to know what you think of both the video and audio quality. Now, the video viewing experience with the Moto G Stylus 5G definitely is pretty awesome. Like I said, having this very large display definitely does make the phone ideal for content consumption, and for video content, you can view it in its regular aspect ratio, or if you want to, you can crop in as well for a very immersive experience. Now, to make it more clear what I'm talking about by this phone not having stereo speakers, you can see when I put my thumb on the speaker on the bottom of the phone, you really can't hear anything. Whereas if I had a phone that had stereo speakers, we'd be hearing audio coming out of both here and here. So again, not a deal breaker, but at the same time, it is something that Motorola has done in the past, such as with the first generation Moto G Stylus, and for some reason, they decided not to do it, despite this device technically being the most expensive and most premium device in Motorola's G Stylus series. So in conclusion, is the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G worth getting? I would say that if you can get this for the right price, then it is worth it, especially if you can take advantage of some carrier deals and promotions, then it definitely makes a lot of sense. On the other hand though, Motorola has another very good device out there as well, known as the Motorola One 5G Ace. Now that phone, which I've tested here and covered here on the channel already, is actually a very good phone and better than this device in many ways. So as far as my various complaints go about this phone, it's not like I have anything against Motorola. It's more like I've used other phones from Motorola in the past that were less expensive or equal to this phone, such as the One 5G Ace, and those devices have been a much better value. But like I said, if you can get this phone for a really good deal, then it's certainly very well worth it. And even if you have to pay MSRP, it's still pretty worth it, but it is very competitive out there, especially when it comes to mid-range smartphones. So there certainly are a lot of options available for consumers. But I hope you enjoyed my review of the Moto G Stylus 5G. If you liked it, give the video a thumbs up. Let me know what other videos you'd like me to make about this device here on the channel, and take a look at my other content about this phone that I've already uploaded here as well. But again, I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Kevin, and I will see you in the next one.